A billionaire CEO opens his mansion door and sees a tiny baby in a basket. Shocked?
A billionaire CEO opens his mansion door and sees a tiny baby in a basket. Shocked, confused, and completely unprepared, he wonders what could possibly happen next. You won't believe what happens to him. The first rays of the Lagos sun glinted off the towering glass windows of Chukwudi Okeke's mansion, casting long golden streaks across the polished marble floors. The city outside was already alive, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional honk of impatient drivers, and the faint chatter of street vendors preparing their day. But inside the mansion, silence reigned, punctuated only by the faint ticking of an ornate grandfather clock in the hallway. Chukwudi Okeke, Nigeria's most powerful billionaire CEO, dressed immaculately in a tailored gray suit, paused at the grand foyer. His polished black shoes echoed softly on the marble as he walked toward the front door, briefcase in hand. Today, he was expected at a high-profile meeting with international investors, a deal that could add billions to his already vast fortune. He was meticulous, ruthless when necessary, and feared in boardrooms across Lagos and beyond. Yet, beneath the impeccable exterior lay a man whose life had been a delicate balance of ambition, discipline, and carefully hidden vulnerabilities. As Chukwudi reached the door, his sharp gaze fell upon something unusual. A woven basket sat innocently on the doorstep. He frowned. Delivery? A gift? But there was no accompanying card, no label, no hint of its purpose. Curiosity prickled at him, mingling with a twinge of unease. Before he could think, a soft whimper reached his ears. He froze. The sound was small, tentative, yet impossibly human. Bending down cautiously, he lifted the edge of the cloth covering the basket and was met with a sight that made his pulse quicken and his breath catch in his throat. Inside lay a baby no more than a few months old, wrapped in a simple, slightly worn blanket. The infant's eyes were wide, dark, and strangely knowing, reflecting a mixture of fear, confusion, and trust all at once. Chukwudi's mind went blank for a moment. His world, meticulously ordered and controlled, had just collided with something utterly unpredictable. Who would leave a child here? He muttered under his breath, his voice rough with disbelief. He scanned the surroundings, the perfectly manicured garden, the gleaming driveway, but no one was in sight. The street was empty. No note, no explanation, no hint of the person who could have left such a precious, fragile life at the doorstep of Nigeria's most powerful man. The baby's small hands clutched at the blanket, and a whimper turned into a soft cry. Chukwudi's first instinct was to step back. He was a man of logic and strategy, not sentiment. This was chaos in its purest form, unplanned and unmanageable. And yet, something in the tiny face before him stirred an unfamiliar sensation deep inside. Something he hadn't felt since childhood, something he had long buried beneath ambition and wealth. He crouched, maintaining a careful distance. "It's not mine," he said aloud, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. "Someone must be playing a prank, or testing me," or he stopped. His gaze softened involuntarily as the baby's lips curled slightly in a tentative smile. It was fleeting, innocent, a pure act of trust. Chukwudi straightened up. Conflicted, logic screamed at him to call the authorities, to hand the child over immediately. Yet a part of him hesitated. Curiosity, responsibility, an inexplicable pull. He studied the basket carefully. No note, no label, just the soft, rhythmic breathing of a child who had, in a mysterious way, chosen him. "Who left you here?" he whispered, his voice low, almost reverent. The baby cooed in response, tilting its tiny head, as if understanding that this towering figure before it was the only one who could protect it. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. The media, the board, the investors, none of them could possibly understand the chaos of this moment. This was not a corporate challenge, a hostile takeover, or a market crash. This was something entirely different, something that required heart. And Chukwudi Okeke, the untouchable billionaire, realized that for the first time in decades, he was utterly unprepared. After a tense moment, he finally made a decision, one that would mark the beginning of an entirely new chapter in his life. Carefully, he lifted the baby from the basket, holding it close but gently, as if afraid to break this tiny life. The baby stirred, rested its head against his chest, and for a brief second, the world outside the deals, the pressure, the relentless drive for power disappeared completely. Standing in the grand foyer of his mansion, the most powerful man in Nigeria felt powerless. And yet, for the first time in years, he felt something entirely unfamiliar, a sense of purpose beyond wealth, beyond status, beyond control. This unexpected visitor, a small, fragile life, had arrived on his doorstep not by chance, but by destiny. The sound of the baby's soft cooing echoed through the hall, mingling with the distant morning bustle of Lagos. Outside, the city carried on, unaware that today marked the beginning of a story that would change the life of Chukwudi Okeke forever. For the first time, the billionaire CEO faced a challenge that could not be solved by contracts, negotiations, or wealth. A tiny heartbeat had entered his life, and with it, a world of uncertainty, emotion, and unforeseen responsibility. He had no choice but to confront it. And so, with a mixture of apprehension and reluctant resolve, Chukwudi carried the baby into the mansion, closing the door behind him. Little did he know, the discovery of this child was only the beginning. The morning light spilled across the opulent interiors of Chukwudi Okeke's Lagos mansion, highlighting every gleaming surface, every expensive detail, carefully curated to display wealth and power. Yet, in that moment, the grandeur felt meaningless. In his arms, the tiny, fragile life of a baby shifted slightly, making soft, instinctive sounds, and Chukwudi's mind was in turmoil. He placed the baby on a plush sofa, observing cautiously. The infant stared back, large, dark eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and vulnerability. Every small movement, the flick of a tiny hand, the stretch of tiny legs, made Chukwudi more aware of his own inexperience. He had built an empire, brokered multi-million-dollar deals, and outmaneuvered rivals with ruthless precision. But this was uncharted territory. Chukwudi paced the marble floors, his expensive shoes echoing ominously. "Where did you come from?" he muttered to the empty room, though he knew no answer would come. "Who left you here? And why me?" He considered every possibility. Perhaps it was a trap. He was a man with enemies, business rivals, ex-partners, even disgruntled family members. Could someone be testing him? Or worse, trying to manipulate him by leaving a child at his doorstep? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Pulling out his phone, Chukwudi called his personal assistant, Neka. Her voice, calm yet sharp, filled the room. "Neka, I need a full check. CCTV from the street, any nearby witnesses. Who could have left a child at my door?" "Sir, I'll handle it," she replied, her tone measured, hiding her own surprise. "But this is unusual, sir. Very unusual." Chukwudi pinched the bridge of his nose, frustrated. Nothing in his meticulously organized life had prepared him for a scenario like this. Every instinct screamed caution. Logic dictated he call the authorities immediately. But there was something about the baby, something that made him hesitate. The child had no cry of panic, only a soft, trusting murmur that seemed to reach past his defenses. He remembered his own childhood, brief glimpses of loneliness buried beneath years of privilege and ambition. The thought made him uneasy. He prided himself on control, on keeping his life predictable. This tiny intruder had arrived unannounced, demanding his attention, testing his patience, challenging every carefully built layer of his existence. Hours passed. Chukwudi observed the baby from a distance, never allowing himself to fully relax. Every coo, every blink, every small stretch of arms felt like a silent question directed at him. Who are you? Why are you here? And somehow, in that silence, he began to ask the same questions of himself. Could it be connected to my past? He had long left behind old relationships. Some ended amicably, others in bitter silence. There were women, fleeting connections, lives that had brushed against his own and vanished. Could this child be someone's doing? A mistake? A consequence? Or was it merely coincidence? A random occurrence in a city of millions? The phone rang again, jolting him from his thoughts. It was his lawyer, Obi. "Sir, I've heard about the situation at your mansion. The media may pick this up soon. I suggest we manage this carefully before it gets out of hand." Chukwudi frowned. "Media? They'll know already?" "Sir, Lagos is small for news like this. Someone will notice. Someone always does. The thought of headlines, billionaire CEO's mystery baby shocks Lagos made him tighten his jaw. His empire, his carefully constructed reputation, could be threatened by a single moment of misstep. He had always navigated crises with precision, but this required more than negotiation skills. It required judgment he wasn't sure he had. He looked back at the baby, now yawning and stretching tiny fingers toward the sunlight spilling in through the windows. A faint, uncharacteristic warmth spread in Chukuri's chest, quickly suppressed by his ingrained caution. He was not a man to show vulnerability. He was a man to make decisions, not feel. Yet, despite every warning from his mind and his experience, part of him felt a protective instinct, a strange and uncomfortable attachment forming. Chukuri's thoughts drifted further. What if this baby is my own? The possibility, however slim, made his pulse quicken. Memories of a past love and old flame from years ago, Amaka surfaced in his mind. Their relationship had ended abruptly, bitter words exchanged, doors slammed. Could fate have decided to test him with this child, a living reminder of what might have been? The mansion was quiet, yet every creak of the floorboards, every distant honk of Lagos traffic seemed amplified. The CEO felt torn, trapped between logic and instinct. Could he really care for a life that was not his own? Could he risk vulnerability, emotional investment, and scrutiny from every corner of society? Hours turned into an uneasy afternoon. Calls were made, the lawyer's instructions noted, assistance briefed. Yet, no matter what he did, he could not ignore the small heartbeat in his hands. It demanded attention, demanded presence, and demanded choices he had never been trained to make. As evening fell, the golden Lagos sunset casting long shadows across the mansion, Chukuri finally sat beside the baby on the sofa. The child reached up instinctively, tiny fingers brushing against his suit sleeve, and he realized with a pang that he had been holding himself back not from responsibility, but from fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being vulnerable, fear of being human. For the first time in decades, Chukuri Okeke felt powerless, yet alive. And in that powerless moment, he understood that the next decision he made would not be about money or empire or reputation, it would be about life itself. The baby stirred, opening wide, unknowing eyes and a tiny smile that seemed almost intentional, as if acknowledging the silent battle raging within the man beside it. Chukuri swallowed hard. Tomorrow, he knew the world would notice. The media would ask questions, the board would worry, and society would judge. But tonight, in the quiet of his mansion, he had only one truth to face. A baby had arrived on his doorstep, and with it, the first challenge of his heart. And for the first time, Chukuri did not know what to do. The following morning, Lagos woke to the buzz of an unusual story, spreading faster than the morning traffic. Social media platforms lit up with photos and speculative posts. A small basket, a mysterious baby, and the mansion of Chukuri Okeke, Nigeria's most powerful billionaire. Whispers and headlines began circulating. Mysterious baby found at billionaire's doorstep. Is Lagos's richest man a secret father? Mystery child threatens corporate empire? Inside his towering office at Okeke Enterprises, Chukuri stood silently by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring down at the city below. The news alerts on his phone were relentless. Every notification felt like a dagger. Journalists, bloggers, influencers, and curious citizens speculating endlessly. Some posts praised him as a compassionate man. Others hinted at scandal. None knew the truth. None could. Obi, his trusted lawyer, entered briskly, adjusting his tie, eyes grim. Sir, it's worse than we thought. Every major news outlet has picked it up. Lagos, Today, Pulse, Channels, TV, they all have the story. Investors are calling, asking for clarification. And the board, they're concerned. Chukuri clenched his jaw, gripping the edge of the mahogany desk. Investors? Board members? This is not a business decision, Obi. It's a child. Nothing more, nothing less. Obi shook his head. Sir, in the eyes of the world, it is everything. Your image, your reputation, even your stock influence, it could all be affected. A billionaire's mystery child is the kind of story that doesn't just fade. It becomes a headline, a scandal, or a morality debate. People will judge, sir. Chukuri's sharp eyes narrowed. Judgment. Of course. people always judged. And yet, this time, the stakes were deeply personal, different. He had faced hostile takeovers, betrayals, and financial ruin before. He had survived public relations disasters, corporate espionage, and scandals. But a child? A tiny life that had no understanding of business, contracts, or reputation? This was uncharted territory, and it terrified him. Meanwhile, in the boardroom, Okeke Enterprises' top executives gathered for an emergency meeting. The room was tense, air-conditioned, but stifling with anxiety. The CEO's decision or indecision was already rippling through the company. "We cannot ignore the optics," began the chief operating officer, his voice carefully measured. "The media frenzy could affect investor confidence. Share prices could fluctuate. Partnerships may hesitate. And personally, it could be seen as irresponsible if Mr. Okeke is perceived as distracted or emotionally compromised." A younger board member, more blunt, added, "Sir, with respect, this could be used against him. Competitors will exploit it. Any sign of weakness, any hint that he is emotionally vulnerable could be leveraged. We need a strategy, fast." Chukuri, listening silently, felt the familiar rush of pressure, the corporate battlefield he had mastered, but now intertwined with something he could not negotiate: the well-being of a child. Unlike deals, there were no advisors who could solve this problem entirely. Decisions mattered in a different, irrevocable way. At the mansion, the baby slept peacefully, oblivious to the storm outside. Chukuri watched from the office window, phone buzzing relentlessly. Messages, alerts, calls, each one a reminder that the world was watching. He felt a strange tension: protect the child at all costs, or maintain the empire he had built with years of ruthless precision. Could he do both? By midday, reporters had stationed themselves outside the mansion gates. Drone cameras hovered above, social media influencers live-streamed, and the city's gossip mill churned with theories. Why would Chukuri Okeke have a child left at his doorstep? Is it his? One headline screamed. Billionaire's baby mystery? Scandal or serendipity? Another questioned. Chukuri's assistant, Neka, arrived at the office, visibly anxious. "Sir, people are outside. Some are waiting for a statement. They want photos, interviews. The story is trending across Lagos, Abuja, even Accra and London. We need a plan." He rubbed his temples. Plan. He had plans for everything: mergers, acquisitions, public relations crises, but never for this. A child, the simplest, most human of beings, had turned his life upside down and made strategy seem insignificant. Obi, noticing Chukuri's internal struggle, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sir, you have to consider your public image. Even if the child is not yours biologically, the perception is critical. You can't ignore it. But how you respond, that will define not just your empire, but how you are seen as a man." Chukuri closed his eyes, taking a slow breath. The board's concerns, the media frenzy, the societal expectations, they all pressed on him. But beneath the weight of corporate pressure, a different voice whispered. A small, insistent voice, the one he heard every time the baby stirred in the mansion. Responsibility. Compassion. Humanity. The clock ticked on. Outside, Lagos continued its noisy symphony, indifferent to the billionaire's private turmoil. But within the walls of Okeke Enterprises, the world had shifted. The most powerful man in Nigeria now faced a crisis he could not dominate with money, influence, or strategy. The kind of decision he had to make was unprecedented. And for the first time, Chukuri felt the vulnerability of mortality, the fragility of life, and the piercing weight of choice. As dusk approached, Chukuri finally stood, staring at the city skyline. His reflection in the glass overlapped with the bustling metropolis, a symbol of his power. Yet inside, he felt small, uncertain, and human. A strange, uncharacteristic thought crossed his mind. Perhaps wealth could not solve every problem. Perhaps this child, small, innocent, unknowing, was about to teach him the most important lesson of his life. And somewhere in Lagos, as the headlines multiplied and the city buzzed with curiosity, the baby slept on, unaware that the world beyond the mansion's gates had already begun to change. The mansion's grand foyer, once a silent witness to Chukuri Okeke's meticulously controlled life, now echoed with soft coos and the faint rustle of blankets. Outside, the media storm continued unabated, but inside, a small sense of calm was beginning to take shape. That calm arrived in the form of Amara, a young, determined Nigerian nurse known in Lagos for her skill and gentle approach to childcare. She entered the mansion, a small black bag slung over her shoulder, her crisp uniform immaculate despite the sun's heat. Her eyes, sharp yet kind, assessed the situation immediately. She had been contacted through a trusted referral, someone assuring her that the billionaire himself required professional childcare for a mysterious infant that had appeared on his doorstep. Amara's instincts had told her this would be no ordinary babysitting assignment, and she was right. "Good afternoon, Mr. Okeke," she said politely, her tone confident yet warm. "I understand you found this baby yesterday. I've been asked to provide temporary care until we determine the best course of action." Chukwudi, standing stiffly near the staircase, regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "You take care of babies for a living?" His voice was clipped, businesslike, yet tinged with uncertainty. "You understand, this is unusual, complicated." Amara smiled faintly, unoffended. "Every baby is unusual, sir. Every baby is a challenge. But I assure you, I can handle this one." Reluctantly, Chukwudi handed the baby to her, the child's small fingers instinctively curled around her thumb. Amara's expression softened. "See?" she said gently. "Trust comes naturally, even to those who've never met you. He or she is ready to feel safe." Chukwudi observed her every movement, noting her confidence, patience, and professionalism. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that this child required more than wealth. It required care, attention, and someone willing to see beyond the material world. Over the next few hours, Amara set up a small nursery in one of the mansion's quieter rooms, a sanctuary of pastel colors and soft fabrics amidst the polished marble and expensive furniture. She carefully bathed the baby, changed its clothes, and fed it with practiced ease. Chukwudi, standing at the doorway, could not help but notice the baby's relaxed demeanor in her care. The earlier tension softened slightly as he witnessed the small, profound moments of trust and comfort forming between them. Why do you think they left him here?" Chukwudi asked, unable to contain his curiosity. The baby's eyes blinked up at him, innocent and unknowing. Amara paused, looking thoughtful. "Sir, sometimes people do strange things for reasons only they understand. Maybe they trusted you, maybe they had nowhere else to turn. But right now, what matters is that he's safe." Chukwudi nodded slowly, though the unease in his chest did not fully dissipate. He had faced rivals, betrayals, and enemies, yet never had he felt so helpless. Amara's presence, however, offered a rare sense of reassurance. She managed the child with patience and skill, and in her competence, Chukwudi glimpsed a path toward stability amid the chaos. As the evening descended, the baby's soft coos mingled with the gentle hum of the mansion. Chukwudi, for the first time since the discovery, allowed himself a quiet moment of reflection. He realized that the infant had already begun to pierce the armor he had built around himself, an armor of ambition, wealth, and control. The child's presence was a mirror, showing him a side of life he had long ignored: vulnerability, tenderness, and the fragile beauty of dependence. Amara noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. "You're learning something about yourself, aren't you?" she asked softly. Chukwudi paused. "Perhaps," he admitted, his voice low. "Or perhaps I'm just learning how little control I actually have." The baby, sensing the quiet energy, reached toward Chukwudi's chest, tiny fingers curling instinctively. He bent down, hesitant, and touched the small hand. A strange, warming sensation passed through him, an unfamiliar, disarming emotion. He had built walls around his life for decades, and yet here was a tiny being, dismantling them with nothing but innocence. Hours passed in this quiet rhythm. Amara instructed Chukwudi on basic care tasks, feeding schedules, burping techniques, and the importance of gentle touch. Though awkward at first, he followed her guidance, slowly learning to interact with the child without fear or hesitation. Each small smile, each coo, each innocent gaze from the baby chipped away at the CEO's carefully maintained stoicism. By nightfall, the mansion was calm. Amara had placed the sleeping child in a crib near Chukwudi's bedroom, ensuring the billionaire could rest nearby without leaving the baby unattended. Chukuri sat in a high-backed chair, gazing at the tiny form curled in blankets. He realized with a weighty clarity that his life had shifted irrevocably. For all his wealth, influence, and power, he was now responsible for something that could not be negotiated, bought, or controlled. A small heartbeat had entered his world, and it demanded not strategy, but heart. And somewhere deep inside, Chukuri Okeki felt the first stirrings of something he had long forgotten: care, compassion, and the undeniable pull of attachment. Tomorrow would bring the city's scrutiny, the media's questions, and his board's concerns. But tonight, in the quiet glow of the mansion, he simply watched the child sleep, aware that life as he knew it would never be the same. The night in Lagos was heavy with humidity, and the distant city lights flickered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Chukudi Okeke's mansion. The soft hum of the air conditioning was the only sound, alongside the gentle breathing of the baby resting in the crib nearby. Chukudi sat alone in his study, a glass of untouched whiskey in hand, staring blankly at the city skyline. His mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. The tiny life sleeping in the next room had forced him to confront parts of himself he had long ignored. He thought of Amara's calm efficiency, her gentle reassurances, and the way the baby responded to her touch. And then, like a sudden spark in the dark, memories began to emerge, fragments of a past carefully buried beneath years of ambition. He saw her face, Amaka, the woman who had once held his heart. Her laughter echoed in his mind, light and full of life, contrasting sharply with the sterile power of boardrooms and skyscrapers. Their love had been intense, all-consuming, and yet fleeting. The relationship had ended, bitterly misunderstandings, pride, and the relentless pursuit of career success tearing them apart. Could this baby be connected? The thought struck him like a thunderclap. He remembered the last day he saw Amaka, the way she had smiled sadly, hinting at secrets he would never uncover. He had asked nothing, afraid of answers that might disrupt the life he had meticulously built. And now, the universe had delivered a living puzzle to his doorstep. Chukuri's mind replayed moments of their past together. A rainy evening by the Lekki Lagoon, laughter echoing under umbrellas, quiet dinners at small Lagos restaurants where ambition and tenderness clashed, and whispered promises that life had ultimately broken. Could fate have circled back, sending him a reminder of what he had left behind? He shook his head, trying to dismiss the notion. Logically, he knew it was improbable. He had no way of knowing the child's parentage and assuming anything could be dangerous. But emotionally, it was impossible to ignore. Every coo he had heard earlier, every innocent gaze, seemed to tug at something deep inside him, a connection he could not name, a responsibility he could not deny. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Amara entered, holding a notebook with feeding schedules and care notes. She noticed his distant gaze. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" she asked gently. Chukuri exhaled slowly. "It's impossible, but I can't stop wondering. Could he be related to me somehow? Or is this just a strange coincidence?" Amara shook her head with a gentle smile. "Sir, sometimes life brings us surprises that we cannot explain. The important thing is not where he came from, but that he's here, safe, and needs you. That's what matters right now." He nodded slowly, but the questions lingered. Every glance he had stolen at the baby during the day replayed in his mind. Every small gesture of trust and recognition felt like a whisper from the past. He could not ignore the possibility that fate had intertwined his past mistakes with his present responsibilities. Chukuri walked slowly to the crib, kneeling beside it. The baby stirred, opening dark, wide eyes and letting out a small, trusting smile. The sight was disarming. Could this fragile, innocent creature be a reminder of the love he had once lost? Or was it merely coincidence, a life dropped into his world to test him in ways he could not yet understand? He found himself silently promising, whatever the truth, he would protect this child. He would learn, adapt, and perhaps understand something about himself that had remained hidden for decades. The baby, sleeping peacefully once again, had already begun to change him. Chukuri leaned back, glass of whiskey untouched, eyes fixed on the sleeping infant. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel something beyond calculation, beyond power, hope, responsibility, and the haunting possibility that life, in its most unexpected form, was offering him redemption. Tomorrow would bring challenges, the media, the board, society, but tonight, he allowed himself one quiet realization. The baby on his doorstep had opened a door to a past he had tried to forget, and perhaps to a future he had never imagined. And somewhere deep inside, Chukuri Okeke felt the stirring of a connection he could neither deny nor explain a connection that promised to change the trajectory of his life forever. The morning sun barely pierced through the dense Lagos haze as Chukuri Okeke prepared for what he expected would be a routine day. But nothing about the past 48 hours had been routine. News of the mysterious baby at his doorstep had not only flooded the media, it had reached the ears of those closest to him, and not all of them were pleased. At the Okeke family estate, a private meeting convened in the stately drawing room. His older brother, Ike, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression a blend of frustration and disbelief. "Chukuri, this is reckless," Ike said sharply. "You're the CEO of one of the largest conglomerates in Nigeria, and now the city is buzzing with rumors. Investors are nervous, board members are on edge, and you're worrying about a child?" Chukuri, seated across the table, maintained his calm exterior, but inside he felt the familiar twinge of guilt. "Ike, I didn't ask for this. The baby appeared on my doorstep. My concern is responsibility, something you might understand if you ever considered life beyond the balance sheet." Ike's eyes narrowed. "Responsibility? This is business, Chukuri. Everything we've built, everything we've fought for, it's being jeopardized because you're entertaining sentiment over strategy. You're letting a child disrupt decades of planning. People will see this as weakness. And the board is already murmuring. They think you're distracted, vulnerable." Chukuri ran a hand through his hair. Vulnerable. The word echoed uncomfortably in his mind. He had spent years cultivating power, cultivating control, and yet this tiny being had stripped him bare in a way no corporate rival ever could. Meanwhile, whispers of the baby's appearance had spread through the Lagos elite, reaching his business rivals. Emeka Nwosu, CEO of a competing conglomerate, saw an opportunity. Over coffee with select journalists, he planted rumors, subtly suggesting incompetence. "Imagine," Emeka said, feigning concern, "the most influential man in Nigeria, distracted by a child? How can someone like that lead a corporation if he is so easily sidetracked?" Back at the mansion, Chukuri faced his own internal struggle. Calls from board members were relentless. Inquiries about the baby's care, warnings about stock market reactions, veiled threats about investor confidence. He had conquered hostile takeovers, market crashes, and boardroom betrayals, but nothing had tested him like this. In the quiet moments, he watched the baby coo and stretch, the innocence in those eyes cutting through every worry about reputation or image. But the pressure from the outside world was inescapable. The headlines screamed, the calls persisted, and even his family's disapproval stung. Amara, noticing the tension, approached him quietly. "Sir, you cannot control what society thinks, but you can control what you do here, in this room, for this child." Her calm voice was a tether to sanity in the storm surrounding him. "I know, Amara," Chukuri admitted, tension leaving his shoulders in a rare, almost human sigh. "And yet, I cannot help but wonder if choosing to care for this child will cost me more than I am prepared to pay." Amara's eyes softened. "Some costs are worth paying. Some responsibilities define who we are, not our wealth or power. Remember, sir, the world may judge, but it cannot dictate your heart." Despite her words, the next few days were a battlefield. Family members sent advisors, each with their own warnings. Friends whispered doubts. Rivals seized every opportunity to exploit his perceived distraction. Even employees within Okeke Enterprises questioned his focus, their loyalty tested by the swirling media storm. Yet, through it all, Chukuri observed one unchanging truth. The baby remained innocent, unjudging, and unknowing of the chaos its presence had created. Each small smile, each grasp of a finger, each quiet sigh of contentment reminded him that some things mattered more than empire, wealth, or power. The tension between duty and emotion, society and personal conviction, had reached a critical point. Every glance toward the crib reminded him that the most important decision in his life, far more crucial than any boardroom negotiation, was still ahead. Chukuri understood, for the first time, that real strength might not lie in dominance or wealth, but in courage. The courage to act according to one's conscience despite external pressures. The city, the media, the family, the board, they could all judge, threaten, and speculate. But the choice of whether to embrace the child was his alone. And somewhere deep inside, amid the storm of judgment and expectation, a quiet resolve began to take shape. He would not let fear dictate his actions. He would not let ambition blind him to life's simplest yet most profound responsibility. And he would discover in the days to come that this small, fragile being held the power to change not only his life, but the very man he had become. The mansion's grand halls, once echoing only with the footsteps of staff and the cold hum of luxury, now carried a new sound: laughter. Tiny, high-pitched, innocent giggles that belonged to the baby on the soft blanket in the nursery. And for the first time in weeks, Chukwudi Okeke allowed himself to pause from strategy, from calls, from the relentless pull of empire, and simply be present. It started slowly. Chukwudi would enter the nursery to check on the baby, initially out of a sense of duty, almost reluctantly. But the child's eyes would lock onto his, dark and trusting, and something unexplainable stirred within him. He found himself responding not with orders, calculations, or analysis, but with care. Tentatively, awkwardly, he began to engage. Amara guided him through feeding. "Hold him gently," she instructed, her voice patient. "Talk to him. Babies respond to warmth, not fear." Chukwudi had never been good with vulnerability. Holding a tiny human being felt foreign, unpracticed, yet necessary. He spooned a soft portion of porridge into the baby's mouth, unsure whether he was doing it correctly. A small smile spread across the infant's face, and the sound of laughter, a soft, melodic giggle, made Chukwudi freeze. For a moment, all his worries, board meetings, media speculation, family arguments vanished. There was only this, a tiny life depending entirely on him, trusting him without condition. And in that trust, he felt something long buried: warmth, connection, purpose beyond profit. Days passed in this quiet rhythm of bonding. Chukwudi discovered the joy of the simplest interactions, reading picture books aloud in his deep, measured voice, watching the baby point at the colorful images and clap tiny hands, carrying the child through the mansion's marble halls, feeling the soft weight against his chest, and hearing the soft cooing that somehow made the world's noise fade. And even singing softly in a voice roughened by years of business speeches, only to be rewarded with giggles that lit the room. Amara observed the transformation with quiet satisfaction. "He's responding to you, sir," she said one afternoon. "You're connecting with him. That's all that matters right now." Chukwudi gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. "I don't understand it," he admitted. "I've commanded armies of men, negotiated with leaders, and controlled companies worth billions, yet I feel powerless in his presence. And strangely, that powerlessness feels right." The baby's innocence was disarming. Every new skill the infant displayed: a first roll, a tentative grasp of a toy, a babble that sounded almost like a name made Chukwudi forget the world outside. He realized that for all his years of calculating risk, planning every move, and guarding his reputation, there was one thing he could not plan for: love in its purest, most unfiltered form. One evening, as the Lagos sunset bathed the mansion in warm golden hues, Chukwudi sat on the sofa with the baby nestled in his arms. The child's tiny hand touched his face, brushing away a wrinkle of worry he hadn't realized he carried. He chuckled softly, a sound rare for a man known for his stern demeanor. "You're teaching me more than I can imagine," he whispered, voice almost reverent. "More than any deal, any contract, any title ever could." Amara, standing nearby, smiled knowingly. "That's the beauty of it, sir. He's small, yes, but the lessons he brings are enormous." As days turned into a week, Chukwudi found himself seeking the nursery first thing each morning, prioritizing time with the baby over everything else. He learned how to soothe, how to entertain, and most importantly, how to listen. Each laugh, each expression, each innocent glance was a revelation. The city outside could speculate, family members could judge, and rivals could plot, but inside these walls, a transformation was occurring. The ruthless, calculating billionaire was becoming someone capable of tenderness. A man who had long measured success in numbers and power was now learning that true wealth might lie in small hands, wide eyes, and the simple, unguarded expression of trust. And for the first time in his life, Chukwudi Okeke understood a new truth. Power without compassion is hollow. Authority without care is meaningless. And a life touched by innocence has the ability to reshape even the hardest hearts. By nightfall, the mansion was quiet again, the baby asleep in his arms. Chukwudi sat in a chair by the window, watching the city lights flicker like stars across the Lagos skyline. He thought of the headlines, the boardroom whispers, the family's doubts, but none of it seemed important anymore. For the first time, he felt a purpose that no business empire, no fortune, no title could ever provide. The baby, unaware of the weight of the world it had entered, had already begun to change him quietly, irrevocably, and beautifully. The morning air in Lagos was heavy with anticipation, though the mansion itself remained a sanctuary of quiet compared to the bustling city outside. Chukwudi Okeke sat in his study, the baby asleep in the nursery just beyond the door. Though the infant was his focus, questions about its origins had been gnawing at him relentlessly. Who had left this child? Why him? And, most importantly, was there any connection to his past? Amara entered quietly, holding a folder. Her expression was serious but calm, a demeanor she had perfected over years of handling delicate situations. "Sir," she began, "I've been in touch with authorities, adoption agencies, and contacts within Lagos who specialize in abandoned children. We have answers, or at least enough information to understand why the baby was left here." Chukwudi leaned forward, tension coiling in his chest. "Go on," he said, his voice steady but betraying curiosity and unease. Amara opened the folder carefully, revealing official reports and statements. "The investigation shows that this baby is not biologically yours. The child is an orphan, abandoned by parents who could not care for him. Someone believed that you, and only you, could provide a safe, secure life for this child. They left him here because they trusted that you would protect him, nurture him, and give him a future that no one else could." All right. Chukwudi's initial reaction was a mixture of relief and confusion. Relief because the possibility of a direct connection to his past, an unknown child from a previous relationship, was gone. Confusion because the gravity of the situation had not lessened. The child's existence was still his responsibility, and the weight of choice still pressed heavily upon him. He walked slowly to the nursery, Amara following, and looked down at the sleeping infant. The baby stirred, opening wide eyes and offering a small, innocent smile. Chukwudi felt a lump in his throat, a sensation he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge. This child, though not his own by blood, had already claimed a place in his heart. "Sir," Amara said softly, "this changes nothing about the bond you formed. He's safe, he's cared for, and he trusts you. But now you know the truth. You can make your decision without the weight of speculation about your past. The question is, what do you want to do?" Chukwudi knelt beside the crib, gazing down at the baby. Every laugh, every innocent gesture, every tiny expression of trust reminded him of the week they had spent together. He realized that he had already begun to see the world differently. The ruthless, calculating billionaire had softened, guided not by money or power, but by human connection. The media could speculate, rivals could plot, family could pressure, but none of that mattered here, in this quiet room, with a child who had no expectations except safety and care. Chukwudi exhaled slowly. "Amara, thank you. I understand now. It doesn't matter where he came from, only that he's here, and he needs me." "Is not Israel da?" Amara nodded, smiling faintly. "Then the choice is yours, sir. Whatever you decide, make it from your heart, not fear." For the first time in decades, Chukwudi Okeke allowed himself to feel fully fear, hope, responsibility, and love all intertwining. The truth revelation did not simplify his challenge. Instead, it crystallized it. The baby's fate rested in his hands, and his actions would define not only the child's life, but also the man he had become. Standing slowly, he looked out the window at the sprawling Lagos skyline. The city continued its chaotic rhythm, indifferent to the private transformation occurring within one mansion. But inside, the most powerful man in Nigeria felt powerless and yet more alive than ever before. The child had arrived unannounced, disrupting a life built on control and precision. And now, with the truth revealed, Chukwudi realized that his next step would not be guided by obligation, media pressure, or family expectations. It would be guided by something far more important: his heart. The baby cooed softly from the crib, tiny hands reaching upward instinctively, and Chukuri understood. This life, fragile and innocent, had already begun to reshape his world. The choice was no longer about lineage, logic, or reputation. It was about love, responsibility, and courage. And for the first time, Chukuri Okeke knew exactly what he wanted to do. The mansion was unusually quiet that evening, the golden Lagos sunset casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Chukuri Okeke sat alone in his study, the baby's soft coos echoing from the nursery. The weight of the past week's events pressed heavily on him: media scrutiny, family pressure, corporate concerns, but now, the most crucial decision lay directly on his shoulders. He had learned the truth. The baby was an orphan, abandoned, and left in his care because someone believed he could offer a safe life. That knowledge brought relief, but also intensified the gravity of choice. This was no longer speculation about lineage or personal ties. It was a test of character, a challenge to the heart of the man he had become. Amara entered the study quietly, sensing the storm in his mind. "Sir," she said softly, "the authorities and adoption agencies are ready. They can take the baby, place him in care, and you can continue with your life as before. Or you can decide to keep him. Whatever you choose, it must be from the heart." Chukuri ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "I've built an empire on control, Amara. Every decision I've made has been calculated, measured, precise. And yet, this is not something I can calculate. This is life, responsibility, love." He remembered the bonding moments, the baby's first giggle at his clumsy attempts to play peekaboo, the way the tiny hands instinctively clutched his fingers, the peaceful moments when the child slept in his arms. For the first time, he recognized that power was not measured in wealth or influence, but in the lives you could touch and protect. Outside, the world continued its judgment. Board members had sent urgent calls, reminding him of shareholders' expectations. Family members had expressed disappointment, subtly implying that choosing the baby over reputation could weaken his authority. Rivals had already begun to speculate, preparing to exploit any sign of distraction. But none of that mattered anymore. Chukuri understood that the true measure of a man was not in how he commanded the world, but in how he chose to protect the vulnerable within it. And this tiny, abandoned child had forced him to confront a truth he had long ignored. Life was not about power, it was about compassion. He approached the nursery, kneeling beside the crib. The baby stirred, blinking wide, innocent eyes locking onto his. Chukuri extended his hand, letting the tiny fingers curl instinctively around his own. At that moment, every doubt, every fear, every external pressure melted away. "This is it," he whispered. "This choice, it is mine, and I choose you." Amara smiled, recognizing the resolve in his voice. "Then, sir, you are about to change not only this child's life, but your own." Chukuri held the baby close, feeling the warmth and fragile heartbeat against his chest. He realized that this decision was more than an adoption, it was a transformation. The ruthless, calculating CEO who once measured success by numbers, deals, and influence was no longer the man he had been. He had been reshaped by innocence, by trust, and by the unspoken bond that now tied him irrevocably to another human being. The turning point was not a moment of public announcement, nor a calculated press release. It was a quiet, intimate decision made in the soft glow of the Lagos sunset, in the presence of life's simplest and most profound teacher. Chukuri Okeke, billionaire and titan of industry, had chosen differently. He had chosen heart over fear, love over convenience, and responsibility over reputation. And in that choice, the foundation of his life and of his empire would never be the same again. The day of the press conference arrived, and Lagos was buzzing with anticipation. Journalists, reporters, and cameras crowded the grand hall of Okeke Enterprises, the city's skyscrapers reflecting the intense midday Sunday. Every headline, every rumor, every whispered speculation had led to this moment. The world was waiting for Chukuri Okeke to make a decision. Would the billionaire deny responsibility, deny connection, and retreat behind his empire, or would he surprise everyone with an act of unexpected humanity? Chukuri walked onto the stage, baby in his arms, flanked by Amara, who had guided him through this emotional journey. The room fell silent. Every camera lens focused, every microphone captured the tension. He took a deep breath, feeling the tiny heartbeat of the child against his chest, and looked out at the sea of expectant faces. This was no longer about image, power, or speculation. This was about life, responsibility, and truth. "My fellow Nigerians," he began, his voice steady but warm, "recent events have brought something very important into my life, a reminder of what truly matters. A child was left on my doorstep, and while many assumed questions about lineage or personal connection, the truth is simple. This child is innocent, vulnerable, and in need of love." A murmur ran through the crowd. Cameras clicked, but Chukwudi continued unwavering. "We measure wealth not by the money we accumulate, the buildings we own, or the deals we make," he said, eyes fixed on the baby, who reached out and grasped his finger. "We measure wealth by the lives we touch, by the care we give, by the responsibility we take for those who cannot defend themselves. Today, I choose to take that responsibility." Gasps, whispers, and stunned silence filled the room. He smiled gently, lifting the baby slightly, letting the world see the tiny face. "I am proud to announce that this child, though not mine by blood, will be my son. He will grow in a home of love, protection, and care. And together, we will prove that compassion is stronger than power, and love is greater than wealth." The room erupted not in chaos, but in stunned applause, tears, and admiration. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, while the world's media lit up with headlines. "Billionaire CEO adopts mystery baby. Chukwudi Okeke redefines wealth, heart over power. From ruthless to compassionate, Lagos witnesses transformation." Outside, Lagos streets buzzed with excitement as citizens celebrated the story. Social media exploded with images of Chukwudi holding the baby, the hashtag #HeartOverWealth trending within hours. Rivals and skeptics were silenced, at least temporarily, by the unexpected act of humanity. Back inside the mansion that evening, Chukwudi sat in the nursery, the baby asleep in his arms. The weight of the city, the media, and society had not disappeared, but it no longer mattered. He had made his choice. And in doing so, he had reshaped not only the life of a child, but the man he had become. Amara stood nearby, smiling quietly. "Sir, you've done something remarkable. Not everyone could have made that choice." Chukwudi looked down at the baby, a rare softness in his gaze. "No, Amara, the child did it for me. He reminded me what it means to care, to love, to be human." And as the night settled over Lagos, the billionaire and his adopted son shared a quiet moment of peace. A life of ambition, ruthlessness, and control had been forever changed by one tiny life left at a doorstep. In the heart of Nigeria's bustling city, a story of wealth, power, and transformation had reached its most human conclusion. Love, in its purest form, had triumphed. Chukwudi Okeke was no longer just a billionaire. He was a father, a protector, a man transformed by the simplest, most profound truth. The smallest lives can teach the greatest lessons. The city outside continued its relentless pace, but inside the mansion, a new legacy had begun. One measured not in money, but in the love, care, and lives touched along the way. And so, the billionaire's empire endured, but it was no longer defined by dominance or ruthlessness. It was defined by compassion, by heart, by humanity.